Next up, we have Brent, you're next. Brent Norris of Hawaii Patients Union. He's going to provide a historical perspective of Medical Cannabis Day and looking towards the future. Brent Norris is a designer that enjoys bringing people together to improve lives and build the new. This is his first cannabis presentation. Today, Brent will provide a brief history on how Medical Cannabis Day kind of got started, what's included in Medical Cannabis Day, and what we have to look forward to. And this is from a patient perspective, caregiver perspective, his most important role yet. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Kai. I appreciate that. Thanks everybody for being here. Really makes the trip worth it. Like I said, this is my first presentation on cannabis. For the last 10 years, I've been getting real experts in front of people, and that's usually medical professionals. Once in a while, we get an attorney that will talk, but it's mostly folks in the medical field that are compassionate. These are people that deal with patients, and they have an innate understanding of what it's like to work with a patient. When we step outside of that medical doctor or nurse or caregiver role into something else, when we step into industry, for example, we start to lose sight of what it's like to have a patient program. Next slide. So we're going to give you a real quick introduction to what we've been doing with Medical Cannabis Day. 2019 was our first year, and it was sort of an add-on event. This was a really great time to be involved in organizing events because the dispensaries we only had one on our island that was open. They'd only been open for 5 months, and they weren't yet trying to take market share from patient grow sites yet. So everyone got along. All the dispensaries were at that Medical Cannabis Day. Senator Russell Ruderman, who introduced, I think, 8 bills for 8 years straight, legalization bills, that never passed. Did our opening keynote. We had music, we had food, everything was really nice, and it was held at rented the venue from a federal agency, which I thought was kind of cool. And so did they. That was National Oceanographic and AA. NOAA is what you would call it. And it was sort of a 3-day event. So that was Friday night and Saturday night was a trade show. We had panel discussions and all that sort of stuff at the Civic Center. This was the first year that cannabis was mentioned on the radio, at least on our island. So we did radio ads, and radio station said, we got it approved, which I was like, what do you mean got it approved? And then they're like, well, you use the word cannabis, and sure. Sorry,
So hit the mic over there.
Check. So that was an important moment as well, and there's just a lot of good vibes going along. And then we did it again on June 14th. June 14th doesn't always fall on a Friday or a Saturday, right? We're real lucky when it does because more people can come out and attend. And so for the 2020, this is when we went virtual. Things started getting weird around the world with COVID, and I think it just made a lot more sense to scale down as these things were happening. And so we did, and it turned out virtual was a really great way to hold these events because people that normally couldn't attend could then attend. So at that time we had people in Queens actually watching the event from a hospital bed, which is, they just felt like they were part of what everyone else was doing, and it was really helpful for their healing journey. So that was a good event. We had legislative panel. We had, let me see what else we had. Oh yeah, this was also it was the prior year when Governor Ige vetoed Bill 290. Does anyone remember that? That was when we asked if it would be okay if we took our medicine to another island, if we wanted to go visit a family member or just have the freedom of travel. And so we got a bill passed, and then the governor vetoed the bill, saying it would give the wrong impression of our rights. Basically, it said the purpose of this bill is to authorize qualifying patients or qualifying out-of-state patients to transport medical cannabis between islands for their personal medical use. Sounds like a good idea. If it's opioids or fentanyl, we're allowed to do that. But this bill is objectionable because of the large number of residents and their visitors who may be misled to their detriment by the purported authorization in this bill of the inter-island transportation of medical cannabis for personal medical use. And it goes on a little bit to really sort of underscore 4 years later why we do these events. Because if we don't, no one else is looking back 4 years and explaining where we were. And I think it's really helpful to have that awareness so that we know where we want to go. And we could go to 2021. Another virtual event, another benefit of having virtual events is we could get Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, a pediatrician, research scientist, working with, I'm sure, thousands of children by now. And she's a personal hero of mine. And so when you do virtual events, you can get anyone from anywhere in the world. The one that we missed was Dr. Machulam. Unfortunately, he passed before we could get him on. One of the interesting things, I think, about the virtual events as well is you can hear a lot of ideas at once, right? When we have a panel discussion, the growers panels, for example, we learn a lot about growing. In our legislative panels, what we've learned a lot about is no one's on the same page. And, you know, one of the questions we like to ask of legislators that want to legalize cannabis is, what does that mean? And so that question has never been answered in a cohesive way. Everyone seems to have their own answer of what legalization means. But when we're faced with criminal charges, it's real important that we know exactly what it means. It needs to be really well defined. So we hope to be able to do that. And this year, in 2022, it was quite a year. This is also the year that we started to organize on other islands. And so that was really important to our success as well, because it allowed more people to participate. So then we could go virtual, but we could go virtual from multiple islands. And I think it was 2023 that we did on 4 islands. And so we set up shop on Kauai and Oahu and Maui. And that was really great. We also had a legislative panel, Senator Joy Sanbuena Matura, who's, I'm a constituent, cannabis nurse Wendy Gibson, Mark Barnett from the Maine Cannabis Alliance. You guys familiar with any of Maine's laws? They're pretty solid. And then Al Byrne, For Country and Cannabis. He's the author of the book For Country and Cannabis. He's one of the OGs from way back in the day, as was Alice O'Leary, who keynoted one of our virtual presentations. And Alice O'Leary is known as the First Lady of Medical Cannabis. It was her husband, Robert, that got the first cannabis license. So that was a really great event. May Fuima'ono Po was also there, and I remember being excited about this one because the very next day I went down to the local Palace Theater and rented out the theater. And I got some help from a sponsor to go rent that theater out, and I went straight down. And then things kind of changed. So here we are, 2024. One of the things I realized, I ran the numbers, and I'm like, why is the state interested in focusing on legalization and not so much patient needs? And you know, they'll say it's taxes. But what I figured out was that based on our population and based on the percentage of consumers that we have, which my number was 250,000 possible consumers. I think Dr. Otto just mentioned 225,000. When you run those numbers for an ounce of weed every month, it is 0.03 something percent of our annual budget in our state. 0.03. That's what we're fighting for. So we're spending this effort on trying to get a 14% tax on medicine for 0.03% of the annual budget. So I don't know how many schools that builds. I don't know how Colorado managed to revamp everything in the world in their state with their revenue. But if we doubled that number to $200 a month, we're at roughly 0.07%. Right? If we double the number of patients, we get up to, 1.4%. It just doesn't make sense at all to be distracted by tax revenue. And putting the money before the patients is not an okay thing to do either. And law enforcement has asked for 40% of that budget to do eradication. So if we do have the taxes, if we do pay the, let's say 0.7%, right, they're going to use 40% of that for eradication. Now, where I live in this remote area, it was ground zero back in the 80s for the drug war. The drug war has not stopped. We should all be very aware of that, especially since we flew Green Harvest missions on Kauai last year, right? Helicopters are flying around on Maui. All of this is going on, but if they pull the plants from our home market, if they eradicate plants from our home market, it's going to cause the price to go up. And when that price goes up, then they'll collect more taxes. And it could easily become this cycle of income, right? It's a new revenue stream for the state if they're able to do that. But this has been tried before. It has huge unintended consequences. A federal report released after, I forget what year it was, but the federal report kind of looked at what happened with the ice epidemic. And one of the things they pointed to was the artificial price controls that were put in place by eradicating the plant. So when they made cannabis more expensive, they made ice cheap. And I don't know about you, I can give you a real simple example. If you know someone in pain, they're going to manage the pain. They're like, give me an aspirin, give me something. And if the dispensaries are closed, they're going to spend $10 on a joint, or no, it can't go buy. They're going to go spend $10 on a bottle of alcohol. And that's what typically happens, is people will self-medicate with whatever they can, and the alcohol is what's easiest to medicate with. It's not that they're looking to read, chapter 329 to find out if it's okay. They're managing pain. So, I hope that we don't get in that situation. We do know cancer rates are around 30%. And I hope that gives you a little bit of awareness going into it. One last thing, we do have the Palace Theater rented for 2025 for the Hawaii Cannabis Awards show. And we're going to honor all of our OGs, all of our legacy growers. This is an opportunity for people to nominate who you want, to go before the nomination committee, and then go before an awards committee, and then finally get selected as part of this show that we're going to throw on June 14th, Saturday, 2025. So hope to see you there. And thank you again, Kai. Thanks for making this happen.